This photo didn't come out of the camera quite as I expected. There was no depth to it, the background was too dark, which wasn't what I remember in the field, but within this raw file I knew there was a beautiful landscape print waiting to happen. Today I'm going to show you how to take a somewhat disappointing shot and transform it into a stunning landscape print. We're going to fix the focus and, most importantly, build a visual path for the eye. Let's jump straight into Camera Raw and dive into the edit. To take that front to back sharpness, I've taken two shots, one for the foreground ferns and one for the background. Later on, we'll photo stack them in Photoshop. For now, I'm using Camera Raw, but if you're a Lightroom user, keep watching. The sliders and the engine are exactly the same. We'll start by raising the exposure by half a stop to bring back some light. I'm also lowering the highlights to -50. You can see the ferns and the waterfall were looking a bit hot, and this protects their detail. Here is a crucial step for anyone who prints. I'm raising the shadows to +30 and the blacks to +35. We were clipping some of the darkest shadows, and when you're printing on matte paper, those areas can easily turn into a black, muddy mess. By lifting them now, we ensure the detail stays visible once the ink hits the paper. The image feels too yellow, so I'm cooling the temperature to 4250. And moving the tint to +16 on the green side. For sharpening, I'm going to 80 with a lower radius and a higher detail. This targets the edges without creating those ugly artifacts or halos. I'll set the masking to 80 to keep the sharpening natural. We can't forget to remove chromatic aberration. This ensures we don't have any type of color fringing around those fine fern leaves. And finally, I'll do a 4:3 crop, removing the bottom section that wasn't adding much to the composition. I'll copy these settings over to our second image. Notice when we change between shots, there is a small luminosity difference between them. So I'm bumping it nearly a full stop so they match perfectly. Before and after, perfect. I'm now ready for Photoshop. Let's start by focus blending these two layers for front to back sharpness. A new layer is created. Let's zoom to 100% to focus peep. We can see there are some issues with the fern foliage. Blending foliage can always be tricky, especially when there is wind, which was the case on this day. To fix this, let's add a white mask. Select a black brush, set it to 100% opacity and flow, and let's bring in the lower layer of fern foliage so we can remove this ghosting we are seeing here. Now you can see when we switch between layers that ghosting is no longer visible. We no longer need this layer, so we can delete it. And now let's flatten these two. Next, let's focus our attention on the background. Currently it is darker than the foreground, which stops the viewer's eye. I want to invert that. I want our eye to follow this S curve from the bottom right all the way to the waterfall. I'm using the TK9 panel here to create a burn layer on a soft light blend mode. It's a huge time saver for my workflow, allowing me to stay in the creative zone rather than digging through menus. If you want to speed up your own editing, I've got a discount link for the panel in the description. It's the one tool I use on every single edit. So I'll draw a vignette mostly on the bottom half of the image. Before and after, we are now starting to point our eye to the center of the image. Let's now create a dodge layer and lift that darkness from the stream and create a clear path for the eye to follow. Before and after, We have now our path highlighted. To create separation between the foreground and the background, we need some depth. Since it was a rainy day, I'm going to enhance that atmosphere. I'll create a new empty layer and change the blend mode to a lighter color. I'll select the white brush at 10% opacity and 20% flow. And I'll just tap in some mist in the background. It might be too much, so let me drop the layer opacity to 70%. Before and after, now that background feels more distant. Those yellow leaves are a little bit faded now, so I'll use a color mask to target them specifically. I'll paint them with a warm orange yellow on a dodge layer. Before and after, it's subtle, but it balances the greens perfectly. Even though it was raining, I'm going to cast a light yellow highlight in the midtones over the waterfall and the foreground, making our eye focus on that area. With the lasso tool, I select the area I want and output it to a color grading layer. I raise the midtones to about 8 and color grade it to a light yellow and feather the mask to 300 pixels. Before and after, let's lower the opacity to 70%. It's a smooth change, but enough to bring in more light. There are some distractions I need to remove. Let's create a new empty layer. Select the Remove tool, zoom to 100%, and let's remove this bit of trash in the stream. I'll remove this also. Finally, let's give it a bit of glow. I'll create a new layer by flattening all the layers below as a smart object, add a Gaussian blur filter, then open the Camera Raw filter and raise the exposure, temperature, and vibrance. Since shadows don't glow, let's apply this only to the highlights using a Lights 1 luminosity mask and drop the opacity to 10%. Before and after, it's a felt effect. It just adds a soft, ethereal glow that brings the whole forest to life. So we started here from a dark, contrasty raw file, and we ended up here with an atmospheric, sharp, print-ready image. We've created depth, directed our eyes, protected our shadows for the paper, and we are now ready to print. Well, now that I'm looking at it, it feels like this area surrounding the waterfall is still a bit too dark. Let me create a curves layer and raise the midtones. Then I'll apply a black mask, and with the white brush and an opacity around 20%, I lighten this area. Before and after, the change is light, but I feel it open up that area a bit more, and now, yes, now I'm ready for printing. There's something special about seeing a photo leave the screen and finally hit the paper. You can immediately see the character of this matte paper. That beautiful, non-reflective texture keeps the colors deep and the greens incredibly lush. Most importantly, the shadows aren't crushed. Lifting those blacks ensured every detail in the moss and rocks stayed perfectly visible in the ink. I couldn't be happier with the result. If you enjoyed this raw to print journey, hit subscribe to join the community. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.